You know how sometimes you're scrolling and you come across something online that just makes you stop? Something so bizarre, so out of place, that it feels like a glitch in the Matrix? Well, we found one of those artifacts, and today we're going to decode this digital mystery together.
Okay, so this is the actual title of a blog post. Yeah, really. It's this insane jumble of emojis, what look like hieroglyphs, and just random symbols. You'd think it's just a bunch of digital static, right? Just noise. But what if it's not? What if it's actually a signal? And that's the big question, isn't it? What in the world is this trying to say? On its own, it's absolute chaos. But here's the thing. Right underneath this crazy title are two chunks of content back to back that are polar opposites. Seriously. And the key to this whole thing, it lies in how they're smashed together.
So let's treat this like we're code breakers. We're going to take this bizarre blog post apart piece by piece to figure out what makes it tick. And I have a feeling that by the time we're done, we might just learn something pretty important about what it's like to be online today.
All right, first up, the first half of the puzzle. We dive straight into the deep end with the entire transcript of the movie A Scanner Darkly, the Philip K. Dick adaptation. And this thing, it throws us right into this super paranoid, dystopian world where everyone's being watched and nobody really knows who they are anymore.
At the very heart of this movie is this wild piece of tech called the scramble suit. So get this, it covers the person wearing it in this constantly shifting blur of millions of different faces and body parts. It makes them a complete ghost, totally anonymous. And you can see the metaphor, right? It's like the ultimate form of online anonymity, but it's also about that feeling of your own solid identity kind of dissolving into the digital crowd. Yeah, the whole vibe of A Scanner Darkly is not cheerful. It is bleak. We're talking about a world where surveillance is everywhere. And the main character, an undercover agent named Bob Arctor, gets assigned to spy on himself. No, seriously. He gets so lost in the job that he literally loses track of who he is. The whole story is about the self just coming apart at the seams.
And this quote just nails the conflict perfectly. At one point, a doctor literally tells Arctor that the two halves of his brain are at war with each other, that they can't form a coherent reality anymore. And that isn't just some weird medical plot point. That is the entire movie's theme made literal. It's a mind and a self splitting in two.
This one hits hard. It's this desperate plea for some outside system, a scanner, a camera, maybe an algorithm, to see him clearly, because he's completely lost the ability to see himself. It's a really heavy philosophical question about identity. Now, I want you to hold on to that feeling of dread because we're about to take a sharp turn.
Okay, boom. The very next thing on the blog is the full script of a sketch from The Whitest Kids You Know called The Civil War on Drugs. And trust me, the whiplash is immediate and it is intense.
And just like that, we've gone from total existential dread to this. A completely ridiculous, rambling suggestion for a new flag. One second we're questioning the very nature of the self, and the next we're debating whoppers. Are you feeling that whiplash? Because that is exactly the point.
Now, the really funny thing about this sketch is its complete and total disregard for any kind of logic or history. The plot, as you can see, escalates from two guys getting high to accidentally ending the Civil War in about 72 hours. It's a story where all the actual historical context has been completely vaporized for the sake of a joke. So let's just put these characters side by side for a second. In one corner, you have Bob Arctor, whose reality is tragically dissolving into nothing. And in the other corner, you have Trevor and Sam, whose reality isn't dissolving, it's just completely wrong. They operate in a world totally devoid of facts, driven by the simplest goal imaginable. The two worlds could not be further apart.
And here it is, the big punchline. That final, oh shoot, moment of realization that their entire adventure was based on a massive, fundamental misunderstanding of history. It's the ultimate joke about context collapse.
So, let's recap. We have a paranoid dystopia about losing your identity, and it's slammed right up against an absurdist comedy about losing all historical context. What on earth is the connection? Well, the connection is the whiplash. The jarring feeling itself is the message. This blog post is a perfect, handcrafted simulation of what it's like to scroll through a social media feed. You know what I mean. One moment you're reading a devastating news story, and the very next post in your feed is a meme about a dancing cat. That is algorithmic curation in a nutshell, a constant stream of information with zero regard for tone, context, or your emotional state. So here's the big idea.
the key to the whole thing. A scanner darkly represents the high-stakes, paranoid, identity-threatening stuff we see online. The civil war on drugs represents all the low-stakes, absurd, context-free nonsense. Putting them together isn't random. It perfectly recreates that jarring digital feed experience. Loss of self, right next to loss of context.
And that bizarre, unreadable title from the very beginning, that's the language of this feeling. It's what it feels like to have your brain scrambled by constantly flipping between dread and laughter, tragedy and absurdity. It's the feeling of living in a reality curated not by a human storyteller, but by a machine that only cares about keeping you engaged.
So why does this one weird blog post even matter? Because it's not just a joke, it's a diagnosis. It's a piece of internet art that perfectly captures a fundamental part of modern life and, maybe, gives us a way to talk about it.
At its core, it all boils down to this number: 2. Just two completely separate realities with two completely different sets of emotional rules existing in the exact same space, one right after the other. And let's be honest, our brains were not built for this.
So how do we navigate this? The first step is to just build a little toolkit for ourselves. Start by just noticing the whiplash. Acknowledge how weird it is to feel sad, then amused, then angry, all in the span of 30 seconds. Then ask why. In this case, a human curator made a brilliant point, but a lot of the time it's just an algorithm trying to keep your attention. And just recognizing that is the first step to resisting its pull.
Which brings us all the way back to that haunting question from A Scanner Darkly. If our reality, our emotional landscape, is constantly being scrambled and rewritten by a feed that's designed just to keep us scrolling, then how do we hold on to a stable sense of self? This strange blog post doesn't give us the answer, but it does an incredible job of forcing us to ask the question.